Howdy folks, welcome to another beautiful day out here in West Vancouver. Today we're going to talk property. So this has happened recently. Well, when I say recently, it was on the 21st of November last year that it actually came into play. It was a rule that was decided on in June last year, I believe. And that is that BC have ended the rental and age restrictions from Strata for strata properties. Now, let's dive into what that means. Strata properties, a strata is like what we have back in South Africa, we call the body corporate. It's the people that organizes and runs the complex or the apartment block or the condos or everything, the board that makes the decisions. Now, something that's happened quite a bit out here in BC apparently, and you know, it happens in the US, I've seen it everywhere, is that, well, we've even had it with our body corporate in South Africa that said in that one apartment we lived in, we are not allowed to put maroon curtains in the window. I mean, these body corporates or stratas are super powerful, and they can make you do whatever they want. Now, one of the things that they used to do over here is that they put rules in place that didn't allow people to rent out their properties. So it's like, okay, well, you can buy a condo in our block, or you can buy a condo in our, or a townhouse in our townhouse apartment, but the strata, the body corporate, just decides that you're not allowed to rent it out. So no tenants in the complex. And, you know, I get why they do it, because they obviously want to say, well, you know, or the argument is that if you only have owners in the complex, they're going to look better after it and everything. And if you bring tenants in, they're not going to care as much, and maybe they're going to make noise. And, you know, tenants are seen by a lot of people as not so cool. And then there were some other strata properties that actually had all kinds of rental rules. It's like, oh well, or rules. It's like, no people under 18. So you can live there, you can rent it out, but you can't have anybody under 18 there. So no people with kids, for instance. Or some have rules. I saw some that had rules, nobody under 25, things like that. So these stratas or body corporates had all of this power to make the decisions, and they just vote and they decide what's going to happen, and the landlords actually didn't have much of a say. Now, you would say, well, you know, it's their prerogative, it's their building, they can decide what they want to happen. But the reality is that it's not that simple, you know. Oftentimes, we know that people need to move or things change in your life. So now you've bought an apartment, you put money into it, and you are forced to leave, but the market is down. You don't want to sell your apartment, but you need to go work somewhere else, and you are literally forced to sell your apartment. Because the crazy thing is, if you just lock your apartment up and let it stand empty, say for instance you now need to go and work in Ontario for 6 months or for a year, and you're from BC, if you just lock your apartment up and you don't rent it out, then you pay that empty home tax from the BC government. They make you pay that, which is, you know, it's a bit of a double whammy. So a lot of people actually got nailed by these strata policies, and they had to sell their properties at a loss because they were just forced to. I mean, you can't have a property sitting empty. If they were allowed to rent it out, they could have kept the property until the market got better, and they wouldn't have had to have that fine at the empty home fine, and they could move and do their year in Ontario and come back, for instance. Any which way, so what happened was in November, on the 21st of November, the law came into effect that took that right away from the stratas, and it said, like, you as a strata cannot impose rent control, and you cannot impose age restrictions except for one. You know, if it's older than 55. So you can have what they call in North America adult communities, where only people over 55 can live in a complex. So it's kind of retirement complexes. So yeah, that's what happened. They decided that, you know, the strata don't have the right anymore. They can't make it happen. And I think it's a good thing. Is it going to have a huge impact on the market? Not really. It's going to be cool for a few people that were stuck with properties. I think the stat says that the lifting of, or this restriction on the lifting of this rental age and age restrictions, basically influences about 300,000 properties throughout British Columbia. And I think they were saying that there was about 2,300 properties in Vancouver that were standing empty because their owners can't live in them anymore. They have to be somewhere else and they can't rent them out. So they're just sitting on them. So yeah, you know, theoretically it will push another 2,300 properties into the rental market. Do I think it's going to have a huge influence on rental prices? Not really. Is it going to have a huge influence on prices in those buildings? Because that's obviously another thing. I mean, no investor wants to buy a property that's got a rental restriction or an age restriction, or, you know, or an unreasonable age restriction, because the reality is, for that investor, I mean, they're buying a place to rent it out. So why would they buy a place that's got a rental restriction? That just doesn't make any sense. Anyway, it's once again just political positioning. And now I see a lot of these stratas that had some of the age restrictions and things in there, or they're trying to convert to over 55 because that's the one age restriction that's still allowed. It's funny sometimes, these things that are happening around the cities that you just don't know much about. Anyway, so there you go. BC has lifted or have made it impossible, or have taken away the rights from stratas or body corporates to actually have rental and age restrictions on any properties. All right, folks, you always have a good one. Cheers.